All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 17th School Building Committee meeting. We do have a quorum tonight, and we have several things on our agenda. The first order of business, I would like to approve meeting minutes from
December 3rd.
December 3rd.
Make a motion that we approve the December 3rd meeting minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained?
Abstain. One abstention.
2 abstentions. So that should be 402. All right.
There were a few action items from our meeting on December 3rd. First, the committee was to review the draft PSR meeting schedule, and that's in our agenda meeting handout tonight, and it's on our agenda as well to conclude on our schedule for our meetings for the next phase. Second, I was to contact the MSBA relative to their signing of the FSA amendment. They've signed that amendment and returned it, and that's part of our agenda package tonight as well. Third, as an ongoing item, was to work with Kent and Flansburgh to understand what consultants needed to be retained during the PSR phase, site consultants, and we'll have a little discussion about that later on. Next action item, Kent and Betsy were to finalize their memo on the gas at Bourne, as well as the gas moratorium. We're going to hear a little bit about that tonight. Next action item, Kent and Betsy were to provide a little bit of more information relative to costs for lead, and there's a handout for us tonight to go over. Next action item, Peter was to contact the moderator relative to the process for vacant seat filling for committee membership, and maybe when we can hear from Peter later on that. Next action item was to reach out to the community center and Bourne TV to make sure that our PSR phase meetings could be videotaped. I've done that, and once we finalize our schedule, I'll send that to them. And then the last action item, I was to keep on the schedule, or our agenda rather, the discussion of the technology use during open meeting, and Jim was to forward the draft policy to all of us relative to the technology use during open meeting. And so Jim forwarded that, and we have that on the agenda for later on discussion. That's it for the meeting minutes.
Okay. We don't have any invoices or commitments? Or
Yes, we do have one
Yep, we have one.
warrant. Warrant number 3. It's in our agenda handout. Natasha, did you get it? Yes. Yep. And that's for ongoing feasibility phase services. 2 invoices, one for Sims Manning McKee and the other for Flansburgh, both totaling $38,600.
Okay. We should vote. So I'll need a motion on approving or is there any discussion first? These are just the 2 services. So we'll need a motion.
So moved. Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Unanimous? Okay. We'll have to sign that afterwards.
You can pass that around while we're.
Now?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yep. We can do it.
Want to sign it now?
Yes. So the next agenda item is the discussion of the PSR phase schedule. And that's, first document in the agenda. The schedule looks, the same as we had 2 weeks ago, with the exception of the April 7th, Community Forum number 6. That was scheduled on a Thursday night, April 7th, but that's the night of the high school performance. So we'd move that to April 6th, which is a Wednesday night. So if we can just spend a moment to make sure that these dates work, we should finalize the schedule, and that'll set us off for our meetings for January through March.
Or is it through the middle of April?
Through the middle of April.
Is April vacation outside of this?
Yes.
Okay.
April 6th is a school committee meeting typically, but I don't think the varied attendance and the number of these, I think that it won't interfere with that.
What about the 18th? Yeah.
School vacation.
What's on the 18th?
February 18th.
Oh,
Would be this meeting, right?
right, but it's a building committee meeting, it's not
Right.
a,
No, I'm
Community
asking
or-
if that's okay for the committee, for every,
okay for me.
okay.
I mean, I'm just one voice.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a majority's fine with that, so.
March 17th is going to be hard.
Yeah.
What do you mean, Mr. Nelson?
I will be here.
I can't do two of them. February 4th and February 18th.
Kevin Michelson.
Okay.
And my brother Timmy celebrated by running over the guardhouse that Mass Maritime.
These are all set up on our Thursday night meetings every other week. Is the schedule then acceptable, and should we post it?
Yeah, I don't. Is any other discussion about any of the dates? I heard March 17th.
Just joking.
All right. So, we should approve this. I mean, if something comes up, then we'll have a reasonable amount of time to change it and post it, and, but this looks like a good format, so.
Right, so
We'll go with this.
I'll coordinate with the community center and
Mhm.
TV for that. Perfect. Our next agenda item is the discussion of the community forum number 3. And Betsy, you wanna lead us on that?
Yeah, we had at the People's School, we had a great turnout last Tuesday. And started off with a tour to those who wanted it. Had a few takers there that toured them around the school with Cheney. And we introduced the project to the community and recapped the previous community forums that we had with the visioning in the beginning and then the existing conditions, and then went into the design options, the 4 main options with the different enrollments and configurations within the study. Then from there, went into each individual option in detail and expressed some of the pros and cons that were discussed in the educational workshop meetings we had and here with the school building committee. And after evaluating, going through all the options, we had gone through the preliminary cost matrix with the community and then opened it up for questions and then an overall participation. And so there was many questions, and then which were very good to hear. Some had to do with the cost that they were seeing for the first time on the matrix, and then we went into each of the pros and cons with the community on each of the options, and heard some of the same pros and cons that were echoed in this room and elsewhere. And overall, I thought it was a very good turnout. Open up for anybody who was there who'd like to share their thoughts on it.
I think the people that went on the tour were, you know, pretty, like they liked the feel of the school, but I think they recognized the challenges with the structure and some of the issues that we face, so.
It's good to have more feedback rather than, you know, the previous meeting at Bourne was a little quiet, this was more animated. It's exciting to hear that. It was brought up recently that we, the last time we met here, we had talked about having some kind of a survey to give out to people that maybe would have been something, that would have been something that might have even made it more engaging with the people that were there. It was just a quick little, I remember the very first community meeting we had, it was more interactive because we were able to split up into small groups and get discussions going. I don't know if we can do that in another meeting. I think that was
I
effective.
think it's something, to consider in a future meeting.
Right,
Sure,
yeah, but
sure.
it was definitely nice to have the feedback, people willing to speak up a little bit.
Okay.
It was informative.
Right.
And that meeting included a lot more people from the community who don't have children in school yet.
Yes.
So they certainly got the message that this is something that's coming up, and that their children will benefit from this. So it was nice to see new faces who really don't have anyone in the schools currently, and to be a part of that conversation.
I think I've seen a natural progression of these meetings. You know, they've been building momentum. And the momentum isn't really to make the final decision. The momentum is really to try to understand what's going on, which is really important. And just for public consumption, we did have childcare there. We had some great students, middle and high school students there to help out. And so we look forward to having that in the future as well. But there's good momentum to try to understand why we're doing this, what this is all about. Because it's amazing to me still, you can talk to people and they have no idea. People who actually even work within the school system, they have no idea that this is even underway. So it's really good to build that informational momentum that we're doing, and I think it's working out well, so.
That's great.
Thank you.
The students who did the childcare, by the way, I just have to give a little plug because they were phenomenal. My kids had the time of their lives. They talked about it, you know, the whole night, even the next day. So congrats to those kids. They did a fantastic job. Yep.
All right. Yeah.
Review of the construction alternatives?
Yeah, I thought I'd actually go over some of the handouts first, and just some follow-up. So on the gas, we heard back from the gas company, so at Bourne, there is capacity at the street, so there's no change. They reviewed the loads that were given to them, and so the gas line at the street has capacity to support a new addition, the increased enrollment. You know, they mentioned you have to perhaps replace the meter and do some other items, but on the street, that option's good. And then they're still working away on the P-bowls with the capacity with the moratorium. But the conversation is right now the new load won't exceed what's there because it's beefed up enough to accommodate that. So we're gonna wait for some follow-up on that, but Bourne-Dale's all set as far as capacity at the street. Okay. And I just want to give a couple items I needed to follow up on. And this document is Green Building, the benefits. And it's a few years back, but it's still referenced a bit. This was a Massachusetts-based document. And this is really the start of the conversation about the benefits of green building and some of the costs that may go along with it. It goes into detail about the different types of building systems, mechanical, electrical, and then just the overall benefits from green design, such as the natural daylight and how that promotes better learning. And also, it does start to touch upon the different categories of LEED with a percentage of what it could cost over a conventional building. So that's in there, but I just want to say that that number always fluctuates. Here, they're saying it would max out at 2% if you went for a LEED silver building. But again, there's different components that will make that go up and down based on what design is developed and site conditions. So, but this is worth reading, and then we'll still work at providing you more information on this. But what it does reference, I just want to say one thing, is the overall payback with having the building systems designed efficiently. And that's really where the cost savings is in the operational cost of the building. So it's a little upfront with the efficient systems, with the boilers and all that, and the exterior envelope. But then there's the payback over the years. So just have a read, and then we'll continue this conversation, provide documents when we can put them together. So. Okay.
Okay.
And any questions on that? Okay. So what we have here are we have four summaries of some of the larger trades that went out there. The first one I'd like to go over. Now, these were the large documents that were forwarded to you. Some are hundreds of pages. They're going to be in the binder. The full detailed report is also going to be in the binder, and that binder is going to be posted and distributed to you also. But this is just a summary of some of the findings. And the first is the environmental site assessment. That's called the Phase 1 assessment. And what that does, it looks at your site itself and neighboring properties and tries to understand if there's hazardous material or petroleum-based products that could have contaminated the ground. And that's really what it focuses on. And so what they do is they get all the records they can from the town. They look at maps that are created showing different areas from even touches upon geological and aquifers. So it's a comprehensive report that not only is the hazardous material, but also touches upon the waterfalls, because again, there's the water that could be associated with contamination. So at the Peebles School, there is one item that was found, and that's an item of the underground storage tank that everybody's aware of. That's a 10,000 gallon fuel oil tank that's underground. And it's on this list as a recognized environmental condition because there was a spill in '95, and we're trying to get more records on that. And so we're still waiting on some documents from the fire department to close that out. So in '95, if it was handled properly and we had the documentation, we can take that item off. But in any future project, that tank has to be removed. And then it just notes some others. There's a 17-gallon diesel fuel incident that occurred on the site, which was resolved. It also touched upon the Camp Edwards and how that is on the that's on the priority list for groundwater contamination, something they've been working on over the years. And that's in the report. And just to let you know, they look at the impact area of that, and the closest point is a half-mile away from the site, so they don't see any issues with Camp Edwards. Or there's a whole list of gas stations along MacArthur that are also noted that had incidents, and they're all well documented. So they don't see any negative impact to a project on your site, except the oil tank that'll have to be addressed.
So Ken, just curious, where on the premises is the tank?
It's right out front, in between the bus drop-off. It's in the island.
It's in the island, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we won't be planting
Pretty
a
much.
garden there.
Was there,
Pretty much
were there
what we're
any
finding.
testing of soils or
No.
borings of any kind? Because when the middle school was built, there was some trash material found
Sure.
that had to be dealt with.
Yeah.
But there wasn't anything.
No, we
as
don't
part of-
test for that.
At this piece.
We don't test for that at this phase of the project. They're just right now collecting information and letting us know that there is something here and it needs to be addressed in the future phase. But we don't test the soils at this phase, so. You know, they do note in the bleaching field that it was in the back where the building was built, where the addition was built, items like that, but no other soil-related findings. Okay, and then at Bourne, looking at the surrounding areas and the site itself, there's nothing that was found on that site, so that's a clean site. And they do want to note that looking at the aquifer map, that the edge, the property line of the edge is within that aquifer protection area. So the DPW building's actually built in that zone, and Bourne Dale is out of that. The parking lot's not included in that, but that's just information that's good to know, and we can study that further when if there's a project over there. So that's just a recap of the ESA. And the next is the traffic we can discuss. So Niche Engineering conducted the traffic analysis work at both the sites, and that consisted of looking at the traffic circulation, access to the sites. They did traffic counts at intersections, and they also did counts of parent pickup and drop-off, so we know that number. So if we look at a future design option, we know how to accommodate that load of the parents picking up and dropping off, so that's very important. And the reason they do the counts at intersections and understand the roadways is they want to know if there's any options that's going to create an issue or an impact to an intersection. So they also looked at 2 intersections over on the Bourne-Dale options. They looked at Edge Hill and Route 6 and Nightingale and Route 6, the 2 traffic lights. So they just want to take the counts there, understand what the increased load, say on an option 5, the worst case condition would be to those 2 intersections. And so they summarize that as actually being very minor to that. And also they quantify the information they collected for the existing schools. They apply it to, again, 2 design options. Design option 3, the worst case scenario with the all district over there with the 5th grade. So they added that increased volume to the parent pickup and drop-off. And with that, there would be 177 vehicles that would drop off and 113 vehicles that would pick up. Currently, you have 137 that drop off. Sorry. Currently, you have 53 parents that drop off. And so you can see the numbers do increase a lot because you have the entire Peebles Elementary School and the 5th grade. But they say with the site circulation, the design can accommodate it. So we would look at strategies how to accommodate that additional queuing. They're also looking at it, and we're updating the traffic report that was submitted. They're also focusing on the pre-K, the K-5 option on the Peebles, because that wasn't initially in play, and it just was rolled into the mix. So they're looking at just the roadways and the conditions, if that 5th grade will cause any issue on Trowbridge Road. But their thought is right now in the big picture, you're not increasing the volume of students because they're still over on the overall campus, but they just want to study any intersections over there. And going into the next phase of the project, this is base information enough for us to understand these options and the impact and some of the existing conditions. But there will be further traffic studies that will be needed that may come from this group, may come from the community, asking us to research some other items, and also to understand, just as I said, the option for the 5th grade at Peebles. So that might be an additional service we'll need to talk about in the next phase.
During the PSR
In the
phase.
PSR phase, and there'll be a cost associated with that work. And just wanted to let you know that when it comes to traffic, we're gonna need some more traffic studied. And when it comes to the other consultants, we're pretty good for where we are in the PSR stage. Maybe have to get Geotech out there one more time, but we'll see how it goes. But traffic is gonna be one of those items that we're gonna have to call up and get back out there. So,
So you're talking,
Looking down the road, after tonight's meeting, when we get to our 3 or 4 options, our preferred options for the PDP submission, our next meeting will want to talk about what are some of the metrics or additional information that we'll want to gain and research for those 3 or 4 options to help us understand how to get to a preferred option. And so part of that discussion will vet out some of the scope of what additional traffic study may need to be.
Yep, exactly. Okay, any questions on the traffic? Again, it's a.
Just beyond the school property area, so including the bridge, accessing the bridge and rotary traffic coming
If
back
that's
on.
part of our evaluation,
Right. So I've had a lot of
information.
parents ask that, and I
Yeah.
didn't know what the answer was.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll see that they, when they did the counts at those 2 lights that are along Route 6 going to the school, they applied that worst-case scenario, with the all-district going over there. So that traffic volume, they know, and they can now use that to calculate other formulas, so, but that's a great example to bring up.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so moving on to geotech. So the work here is to investigate the subsoil conditions, the bearing capacity, and that helps us understand site drainage, understand what kind of soils we have there to aid with draining the site, parking areas, but also the structural bearing substrate we have there. And that helps determine what kind of foundation we'll have. Is it just standard spread footings, or is it something more elaborate? So they did 4 borings at Peebles, and what they found was the soils are of sand deposits, which are good. It's good drainage soil, and it's also good bearing. So that type of soil is extremely beneficial to the project, and that's at both sites, what they encountered. So knowing that in one of the borings, there's a map associated with this. In B3, they ran into some large boulders, so that's something to be aware of, what's going on over in B3. But that's by the baseball field, where the children's play
Softball
area
field.
is. Oh, sorry, the
Softball,
softball
yeah.
field, where the play area is in the back of Peebles. They have the groundwater that was leveled, average 7 to 8 feet below grade. And when it comes down to it, you can use standard spread footings, and we wanted that information when we have the cost estimates prepared for this. And that's why it's good to get in there early and understand what's going on with the soils. And similar with Bourne-Dale, again, had the sandy soils, which is good for the drainage and capacity. And the groundwater was measured at the time. It's a seasonal fluctuation at 8 to 12 feet below the grade. So again, standard spread footings over here, and they didn't encounter any ledge right there that may prohibit, blasting or anything other than that. So that's all good news on the geotech. So what that does is it just tested all those original 14 options, and now we're down to 7. It tested those different areas. And so if going into the next phase, we'll look at that amount of information that may be enough to go on, or we may request to do a few more borings, knowing which options are preferred.
It seems pretty good, though, pretty consistent on
Yeah.
both
Yeah.
sites, so.
That's good.
And it's a win, because there's the structural side, but also there's the site drainage side, which is great. So if your site drains well with the sand, that's perfect. So. Okay, the last one is the hazmat, and Fuss and O'Neill conducted this. They looked at different areas of the building. Some of the, they looked destructive work, which means they just analyzed behind some of the materials that are not visible, was associated with the brick veneer, the roof, and the ceramic tiles. And, the focus here is to look at lead paint, the ballasts that may contain mercury, and also get an understanding for the presumed PCBs that may be within the school. And so what they have in a long report is they quantify what was found, and it's known to the school. They have replaced windows, and this company is retained by the school currently to assess if a window needs to be replaced. So everything here is what's typical on a building this age, so there's no surprises here. Lead on the windows, there's areas that could contain PCBs, mercury, containing light ballasts were quantified, and then all these samples that are noted here, caulking, damp proofing, some plaster, were tested, and they have asbestos. But, you know, everything right now is contained, everything is operational. But this is good information to have when we look at the options with that building, and also to create a cost associated with abating those materials. So again, it's a lengthy report with a lot of detail, and this is just a summary of it. So that concludes all that.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll move on to number 6, review of construction alternatives. That must be this handout.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the whole handout. So I think what we'll do is, all the options are here.
Right.
And we can go through it. This is the, per option, there's some more notes here in detail than you've seen in the past, especially on the floor plans. So nothing's changed, it's the same plans that have been reviewed here, but we've added some more information. On the first page with the site plan, we have the organizational diagram, and you can see the way the north and the sun orientation occur per option. And then the floor plans, what we did here is we took some of the key points that we've heard through the planning, and we tried to key them to those areas. So the outdoor classroom, and we just wrote a note what is good about that. That, you know, promotes collaboration, and it's a great resource for the school, that limits distraction to the academic wings. And so these things just summarize what the plan is. So what we can do is I can go into detail about any of these options, if anybody has any questions. Or we can kind of dig into the evaluation if everybody's okay. But you have all the options here.
My comment is that I think that you've taken everything that you've heard from us, from the community forum, and you've really, I mean, you can see that the details are emerging from that.
Yep.
So you know, I looked at it real quickly before, and I'm looking at it again. It's pretty consistent with what everybody's been presenting to you, so
Right, great,
it's much appreciated.
right, great, thank you.
Question?
Yes.
On the option 1A, what brought this to mind was when the first design of the Bourne School was done and put out to bid, it was designed as a kind of a pod unit construction with a lot of wall areas and hallways and a bridge and all kinds of things, and the costs were just over the moon. And it looks like this proposed design has a bigger footprint. In other words, it's not quite to the degree that that plan was, but it's like almost two separate structures as I'm looking at this. Is there any way to do this with or would there be savings made with a building design more similar to the Bourne, where it's just, you know,
Well, every site's different, and there's a combination. There's the program that's required in the area, and then there's the site. So those are two main components, how they'll fit into it. You know, this isn't a model school. This site is particular, but there's also the conversation of how the spaces work together academically. And so this is a combination of all three. It's the size of the building and the program, it's the siting, and it's also takes what we've heard from the educational meetings and positions the pieces related to how the school would like to operate academically. So there's always efficiencies. That doesn't mean that it's going to come in, you know, $10 million under what it is now. But that's something we're always going to be aware of in making it a very, very simple design. What you see here is a very compact footprint. And what it's doing is there's a clear separation from the community functions from the academic. And a lot of that has to do with using these functions without disturbing the academic wing. So the academic wing is just a simple bar, and the community wing is just a simple bar. And just with that being said, that's the process. And we'll always keep in mind of any efficiencies that we can develop as the plan gets developed. So right now, this is really it's a concept that has the program on your site with the square footage. And then in the next phase, if this ends up being a preferred option, we're gonna look at developing it further and defining the footprint. But right now, it's still probably at the 20,000 foot level.
I guess my concern is with both the previous two schools we've built in this town, we've had major issues getting voted at town meeting because of cost issues and design issues.
Sure.
And I just see that this community, especially in light of the recent override issue, being very cost conscious. And looking to see that we get the best bang for our buck.
Sure.
And, I mean, no one wins if we get all the way down the road here and we can't get this thing voted. And that's why I'm just,
And that's why we do the estimates so early on, so you get to see that, and that's the beginning of the conversation for all the options, and so that's what we're gonna work on. But there's nothing here that's more extravagant than a typical school as far as its layout and its material. It's a simple bar. There's efficiency in the way it can be organized structurally. This side could be a block-bearing wall with steel joists for efficiency with the structure. The other could be a simple steel skeletal frame. So when we lay this out, we think about all those pieces. And so there's a lot of parts that'll come to play in the PSR phase as we develop one of these options.
thank you.
Yep.
Rich, I think too, I tend to agree with you. And it's sort of like a seesaw that you have to take approach, because at one point we're talking about like generalities of design and even budget, and I know they've thrown some numbers at it, but it all can be kind of whittled back, and it can move. So when we're looking at the two sites, we sort of have to take into consideration it could be any design, and it could almost be any budget, and how we go forward. And I know that that's difficult too, because you're on the other side of it saying, well, I'd like to see something that is attached to that site more so than just a box or an idea or just a budget number. So there's a lot of juggling balls that they just can't land, but we have to still whittle our options down to 3 or 4 anyways, and then hopefully we start making those balls land and firm it up and get plenty of feedback with the community too, so that it becomes a real project that people can get behind and afford too. I mean, I totally agree with you. So
Let's see where it goes.
there.
Does anybody have any other comments on some of the options that need some explanation or further detail?
Well, I didn't have any questions about the options, but there on some of the evaluation criteria, I felt like some of the subjects might have been a little general. Like I'll use, for example, number 23, advantages to middle school. So when you're rating that, it depends, I guess, on which way what advantage in your mind. I know we talked about some advantages, but some of the categories didn't exactly spell out. So I don't know how people voted. Like, there was only a few of those, but I just wanted to kind of point that one out.
Well, maybe that's a good
Is-
segue to go to the next part of the meeting, which is to kind of talk about our individual evaluations.
Right.
And how did that go? Is it a good stepping stone to have the further conversation about what are our top options, or flip it even, to say which options we clearly feel we would like to pursue. But I think for the sake of our records, we should go through the evaluation. Maybe there's a summary set of numbers that we can have from each of our individual work that we did, or.
Yeah, I mean, I feel it would be, if, how many in here have filled it out?
Yeah, I filled it out.
I don't have mine in front of me.
So I think it would be
Good.
good.
Everybody?
Excellent.
So what we could do is, we could go around by option, and if anybody wants to add some comments to that, so if we go around the room and just discuss 1A, and just
Jim, I think you've got a
provide us with,
question out there.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to handle that.
Try to
No, I,
I'll have ample time to ask.
go around per.
only because I have a public comment section, but I don't know if it can wait. Can it wait for that?
Just a quick thing.
Sure, come up and use the mic and.
Do I need to introduce myself?
Yes, please.
Susan Barricchini, Pocasset. I was on the second building committee with Mr. Lavoy, and so I wanted to piggyback what you talked about, condensing the footprint. One of the things that comes to mind is the separation of community activities and the academic committee activities. And what comes to mind is the makeup of the middle school, how the gym is on one segment, but still not so far away that everybody can't access it. The other thing we have to consider is how long it will take students to get to those common areas, those community areas, from the classrooms if they are so far apart. Because that's, and Ms. Norton and Mrs. Carpenito can talk to that more because they're working with those kids in that age group. To have them trek so far is important. But again, with that footprint, if it's something where a gymnasium could be skirted around the end of the building, I was thinking maybe even have it connect to cafeteria, where those two areas, doesn't matter how noisy they get, because they just are. It's natural to their environment, but
Yeah.
that's,
And I just want to let you know, and it kind of goes to both the comments about just the design. Again, we're at kind of a general
Right.
level. But when we go into the next phase, what we're going to do is, if we want to look at this one option and do test two different designs for it, we will do that. But we're going to provide a cost for it, because that's how you're going to be able to know if making it more compact, something has to give here or there, but at least you'll have some options to look at, and you'll have costs to compare. So that's how we're gonna do that.
Okay.
And that's what we always do. So if there's 4 options selected tonight, or whatever the number is, we're gonna look at different designs for all those. It's not just this one. This is just testing the.
right. No, I totally get that, but where you've been so great, as Mr. Lamarche said, you've been visibly incorporating all the things that you've gleaned from the meetings, and that's important. And I just figured this was the moment to piggyback what Mr. Lavoy
Yep.
said about that being an important element in the next set of.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
Alright,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I guess we're
Wanna do it one person.
going to talk about option 1A first.
Are you okay to?
Well, let me take a quick poll of the group here. Do you want to go each option, or are there options that we don't even need to discuss? I don't know. Is there any certain pleasure? We can start with 1A and just go from there.
Start with 1A and
So let's
and
do
go
that.
through. And I think if anybody wants to add a comment, this is the time.
Okay.
Before we do that, can I just ask a question? Is the issue with the middle school based on separating the 5th from the 6th, 7th, and 8th, or is it a space issue? Is the building overutilized at this point?
In previous meetings, we've discussed at 5th grade that there was thought that when the building was first initially constructed, it was meant for 6, 7, and 8. 5th grade was kind of an addition to it. There are some unique spaces that are constructed in there that are now permanent classrooms that are not used for what they were previously constructed for, and that there's always this belief that 5th grade should actually be at the elementary level. So we wanted to explore that in our feasibility study, because 5th grade is really at the elementary upper elementary grade. If you look across most communities, 5th grade is incorporated within their elementary schools, not their middle school. There are a few that are 5 through 8. There are many that are K through 8, but most of them are 6, 7, and 8, or 7 and 8 at the middle school level.
Okay.
Okay, so why don't you take us through?
Okay, yes, why don't we go around the room and just talk about 1A, and just give us your total, your bottom line total.
Oh, I didn't.
Oh,
In my personal opinion, in the opinion of parents and members that I've spoken to of the town, I think overall the option 1A is a good option in that it's on the people side that seems to be overwhelming for me anyway. My interactions with people, people are very passionate about having the two schools, and it's not necessarily because of the sense of community as it is that people are shying away from the size of the Bourne School. The proposed size of it is so big, I think people are having a hard time wrapping their head around it. So the advantage, one advantage I would say, to 1A is that it keeps the school small, but that could also be a disadvantage, because it's very possible that maybe the projections would be off, and all of a sudden here we are with a really expensive brand-new school that is completely at capacity. So I think that needs to be kind of taken into account. But that was my overall feeling on it.
I, too, like the size of 1A because it is a small school. I'm a proponent of small schools. I have been throughout my school committee days and building committee days. However, I'm not, so the caveat to that is, I'm not sure that's where our town wants to travel in terms of finances. I do agree with Natasha that in a different option, I think is too big. But for this option, I had a total of, I just added up my numbers, I had 47. But I like the new school, however, I'm not sure our town wants to finance that size school.
great,
That's a good
thank you.
point.
I had, for 1A, I think I have shared some of the same sentiments. I am concerned that it is, although I think smaller is better, smallest is not. So, and that's how I feel about this option. There's so many things I do like about it, the least disruption to the school in terms of building it. If it's on this side, the subsidy that would come in raising Peebles, which we wouldn't have on the other side. This side of the canal, neighborhoods, school, so to speak, being able to utilize the resources of not just the middle school, but also the high school. But I am concerned that it is too small. But in terms of the rating, and that's kind of like tough about some of these criterion, is that you have one question, but it's really huge question. So for the size of the school, I actually had it as a 1, because it was least desirable in terms, because it was too small. But my overall score was 58 for that building because of all the other advantages. But, you know, taking a step back, I don't think money-wise it's the best option.
We'll see how they all kind of play
Play
out
out,
at the
yeah.
end, yeah.
I think a lot of my comments would mirror what's been said so far. I think it's a very small building. I am fearful that with the projected number, it is at capacity right away. I really liked, out of the 250 options, that this one was least disruptive to the current occupants at Peebles, and the time I think spent on the project, it would be a quicker project because you're not moving kiddos and shuffling everywhere, and even creating some of the parking spaces and the new courts and just kind of everything around it was a good option, but it was the size that was definitely a downfall.
Did you tally up?
I did not. I don't have my final.
Okay.
For me, this was my second highest vote getter. This was 50 points for me. I think it was probably more of, one of my responses was more balanced with the 1s, 2s, and 3s compared to other options. I think where it scored really low for me was size of school, maximum building efficiency, because of the size. Centralized elementary resources, it obviously doesn't lend itself to that. And I didn't believe that this would be maximum use of MSBA reimbursement for this construction cost as well. So it has a lot of positives to it, but I just think that's why it's my second highest, but I just had some concerns about some, as Janie said, some large items that are listed in the criteria, so that's my position.
I haven't tallied mine because there are certain areas that I haven't answered just because I think they were a wash for the various options. But I did rate that one high. But again, I think Janie summed it up best, is that smaller is better, but smallest is not. And I do think that this is too small a building. I don't think we get enough bang for our buck with SBA, and so I would agree that this is a good one, but not the best one.
I have my tally here. I have 54. I think some of the criteria that scored the lowest that I had in was the building efficiency and the cost of operation construction, versus what the size of the building is for bang for the buck. Also, even in I had for least environmental impact, I think the whole site is really going to have to be touched to do what we're talking about here, because you have the existing building, then you're building in front, you're going to be building behind, so that whole site has to be touched. Also, in again, this is just one of those generality issues that I took with resolves geographic separation by canal. That was one of our headings here. Nothing resolves geographic separation by canal. It doesn't really matter for me what side of the canal it's on. As long as the canal's there, nothing resolves it. So,
Bridges, it's called bridges.
That's Bourne, yeah.
and as far as good points would be that it is a brand new school. It can be what it needs to be, and it does remain part of the campus that's there. I know that there's been some talk about that. But again, I think it's too small for what we're really looking to ask in the long term. So I think it's pie in the sky to have a nice brand new small elementary school, but I think when sort of the rubber hits the road, that it's really just something that is probably not financially feasible, which you hate to go down that road, but I think you have to be a little bit sincere about the options, and I just think that it's probably not enough bang for the buck overall. So
okay, I scored this the second highest. I had 49 was my score. Probably mostly because it's a new building. I don't really support any option that has to renovate people's, knowing the building as much as well as I do. I don't think there's any, that's my opinion, any way to renovate or add on to that building makes any sense. So I would say a lot of the same sentiments. It's a smaller school, but I think the new construction is favorable. Maybe on this side of the on the other, on the south side of the bridge, I think is favorable from what my opinion, from what I hear from people in the community. That's all I have. What do you, Rich?
Yeah, that was my second highest score as well, with a score of 53. Option 1G, I just totally discard. Based on the information I've seen in that building and read about in that building from different reports, I would never vote for nor recommend anybody vote for a renovation of that building. I think it would be a nightmare and a real financial headache to the town. I think it could be a real disaster. So I really pretty much eliminated that option, option 1G. Most of what's been said I agree with. I think it's essential that we have a school on both sides of the canal for logistic reasons, and who knows what's going to happen in the future if there's a bridge issue or, and I don't think the town would ever vote to remove a school there and just build at Bourne-Dale. Bourne-Dale might be the best option cost-wise, but I just don't think it would ever get voted.
I gave it a very low score, both 1A and 1G, 37 equal. It's not big enough. I don't believe the amount of students, it'd be underbuilt before it ever opened. So it's a waste of money. You build a bigger school, you always can fill it with something. I mean, there's everything new technology coming out. I just don't think it's worth it, either one, 1A or 1G.
I kind of voted based on, I actually had this one as my second highest. I kind of voted based on the feedback we received. I think it's early to start rating options on a lot of this stuff that we don't necessarily have a lot of information on. So I just kind of listened to the feedback. I went back I voted kind of based on the feedback we received, especially at the last public forum. So I had this option as at 48. It was my second highest option, and I do not. I think it's I think keeping the school in the site is. I'm not gonna list a lot of positives. Same reason everybody else has. So that's. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sure.
Okay. Start with,
Do we wanna
start with none.
You don't get.
Oh, we don't have to,
Mark
no, we'll start with Natasha.
Okay. I don't like this one
Me either.
at all. I don't like anything about
Do
it.
you have a number?
I don't, I started with ones and then I just stopped rating it because I don't feel
So
that
a
it's
24?
appropriate. Sure. Yeah,
I wanna keep a tally.
sure.
For the official
no worries.
record.
No problem.
We need one in.
I would agree with Natasha.
24 for Mary Jo.
What did you say for 1G? Oh, did you, okay, yeah, I think, mine was, for 1G, mine was, 50. I just think any disruption to students is not a good thing, especially if it's gonna be prolonged because of a renovation. Plus, I just don't think it's worth it, given everything that we're gonna run into. Or just like any other renovation project, whether it's a house, a building, you never know what else you're gonna run into until you get in there, which only drives up the costs.
Okay. Liz?
In order to give a number, I'll give it a 24. I struggled to find anything I really liked with this one at all. And again, I think the disruption to students is a biggie, and what the staff will have to incur, moving and, just didn't care for it.
For me, this was my lowest point getter. This was 41, and I think what really spoke to me about this one is that you really not, if you're talking millions of dollars, this one is just not. I don't see the value of the little bit of change that you're making and taking off one annex and putting basically two other little sections onto the building and making it work. So this was my lowest point getter.
I agree. It does have the neighborhood school advantages, the resources available in the school, high school, and all of that, but I rated it a 30. It's probably my lowest, I think. Not quite my lowest, but it's just too small. I just can't support anything that we're gonna do with the existing building.
Okay. This one tied for my lowest score, 42. The few bright points it has, which are very few, are that it still keeps the campus, and then it also would maximize the reimbursement because it's addition renovation, and you still have that centralized campus. But other than that, you could afford to run the existing building for generations and never have to pay the amount of money just to renovate. And although it would expand the footprint, it wouldn't change it probably for the amount of money that you're spending. So it's really a no-go for me.
Yeah, ditto for me. I give it a 41, which was my lower scores. Just pretty much every sentiment. I don't support renovating that building in any way myself.
Yeah, I actually did give it a 24 when I rated it, and as I mentioned before, I just would never support or vote for the renovation of that building. I think of the Falmouth High School renovation and the $20 million cost overrun, and this 23 now, I guess, and still counting, and
Yes, they
I just, no way.
I gave it a low score of 37. I cannot support it in any way. After we get all done, what do we have? An old school with a fancy inside. That's all we have. I can't see wasting the money.
I gave this option a 0, not for the same reasons as everybody else. I probably will buck the trend on, one of the options I do feel is actually a viable option to reuse the school. I think it's probably one of the better bangs for a buck, but, option 1G, I just didn't even bother to rate, so. Do you want me to start on the next?
No.
Keep going.
Keep going.
All right. Option 2A, 725 at Bourne. Natasha. Also, did you have a score for 1A?
I'll get it
Okay.
as we go.
Okay.
as well.
At least
trying
by
to
the
catch
end,
up.
we need to fill in,
Sure, no problem.
if anyone.
So this was the smallest Bourndale, oh, I'm loud, the smallest Bourndale option. I actually got a score of 44. I think if the building is gonna happen over there, I think that's a reasonable size. As much as I do feel the 5th grade should be included with the rest of the other kids, I'm not sure that high number of students is necessary for our town. So of the Bourndale options, this scored the highest for me. I think that's pretty much all I have to say about it.
Okay, I too, I gave it a 45. Of the 3 Bourndale options, it is the highest score that I awarded that site. Because as much as I love Bourndale, that's a big school as it is now. And I think what goes on at Bourndale is fantastic, and to me, that's the priority, what goes on in the building, not the building. But I think that has to be included when you think about what goes on in the building. So of the 3 Bourndale options, that one is my favorite.
For me, of the Bourndale options, this had the best score. I had this as a 44. I like the design of it. I like the expansion of the gyms, but I do have a concern about the libraries, the Learning Commons area that we did discuss. And I too just have a big concern about going from 68,000 square feet to 114. And so just the size of the school, and also the movement of kids and just the interruption to learning in terms of the renovating, and how the project is actually gonna be extended several months or a year time-wise just to build it. So it extends the time of disruptions to kids, and I think that's a big concern. I also think it's $2 million to put it over there, to not get the credit for the raising of Peebles, is, if that's what ends up happening, that's a lot of money, I think. And I do have big traffic concerns coming home, because we're gonna be going with the traffic. So that's a big concern in terms of getting home, especially in the spring and fall months especially. But in terms of, some of the creative ideas with the adjacent spaces, I think I like a lot of this, but, so of the Bourndale options, it's my favorite. Yes, sorry.
Nope, no, I just didn't want to interrupt you. I had a 65 for this one. I don't know if it's living there in Bourndale already, that my view is a little skewed. I don't see this as such a huge undertaking or huge option. I live on this side of the bridge, so I travel back and forth over the bridge at any given day. And although there are nuisances and cranberry truck spills and everything else, you know, it still works, and I think that's going to happen no matter what. I don't see this as too huge of a space for the kiddos. I like the way there is separation according to grade levels and kind of a cohesive group with grade levels, but I also like that there is more collaboration as far as having an entire grade together and being able to utilize resources and the kids being able to have that cohesiveness together. I really love the entry area and the outdoor classroom being in that space, and then the community spaces as well. And I think a lot of that, I know some of the concerns that came up already are, you know, student distances and walking to those spaces, and a lot of that is creative scheduling. We do it now, you know, to make sure that if kids have phys ed, they're going to lunch right afterwards, and it cuts down on that travel time around the building and things such as that. So I really liked the layout in this option.
This was my fourth highest option. I had a score 47. This was my highest amongst the larger additions to the schools for a couple of reasons. One is I thought that you really maximize a lot of the MSBA contingencies on room space, square footage. You actually get a full-size gymnasium at Bourne Elementary School. I thought it did a lot around clustering of the grades. And, you know, I understand the size of a building to us as adults, but kids only live in their own little world. They only see their classroom. They don't see that they're in a 100,000 square foot building. So this was the highest. I think it does a lot if there is a consideration for this one, meaning highest for the largest, for the large buildings. I just think it adds additional space for cafeteria, for a gymnasium, for those community areas. But it did receive a 47 for me, which is my fourth highest score. So.
I gave this a 43, and I would really agree with most of what's been said. I like the layout, and I'm glad to hear Liz reinforce that the travel around the building won't be an issue. It's larger than I'd like to see it, and it doesn't do anything to alleviate the pressure of the 5th grade at the middle school. And it removes our neighborhood school on this side of the canal. I gave it a 43, which is the highest of those options, of the Bournedale options.
I gave this was actually my top score, but it's also the top of the 3 larger options, so I have 57 for this one. And I've heard some of the feedback about the size and the location and the traveling, but you know, I try to step back a little bit and think too that when we're talking about these sizes, this might be the worst it ever is. There's a trend in the Cape that everyone is just getting smaller. Families my age, they're not here, and they're leaving, and there's schools that are going to be closing on the Outer Cape because they don't have enough families to keep them afloat. So I think that sort of permeated my thoughts, is that maybe this is the worst it ever is, and it might only go smaller. Chances are it will. So we may not be talking about a school that actually has that kind of population, and we may be better off being condensed, because you may find out if MSBA is looking for a 50-year alternative, then in 50 years, 2 schools is just insane. And maybe it will only be 1 school. So for that reason, I think that there's a lot of efficiencies there. There's an existing newer school that can be expanded, and everything can be housed at one location. And I understand the bridge problem. We'll never get over the bridge problem. If you live on this side of the bridge, you still have a bridge problem if you're going over with middle and high school students. Or if you're on the other side of the bridge and you have a pre-K student, everyone's at Bournedale. It's you know, it's just, we can't solve it. Everyone, and eventually, after months or a year, it becomes routine and it kind of goes away. So, clearly, you know, there's sentiment to both sides of that. But as far as the neighborhood school, I mean, I'm starting to think maybe this is the neighborhood school down the road. So those are just my thoughts and why I've rated it the highest.
Yeah, I scored 41. It's a lot of the same sentiment. I think the school, if it does end up, you know, everybody wants to build on that side, you know, at the Bournedale site, it's probably the best option. Because it is, you know, I like the design of this building overall.
I gave it a 50. I think the biggest drawback is I don't think this town will ever vote to have one school and eliminate, you know, school on this side of the bridge. And I just think it's critical that we think down the road. The canal is an issue, the bridges are an issue. We've had situations in the past here where one bridge was closed or for all practical purposes closed, which meant rerouting kids all over the place, trying to get them around. And I just think it gives us an option with two facilities. This is the only town in Massachusetts, and it's one of the only in the country that has this unique situation. And I think the state should recognize that. It's a major issue. Nobody else is dealing with this.
Rich, could you repeat your score? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
I'm sorry?
Did you say 15 or 50?
Oh, 50.
50.
That was my,
Okay, I was like,
I guess I ranked that number 3 out of
Okay.
the 4 that I did.
all right.
I rated it a 55, the highest out of the 3. I took it one step further. I included safety. We have Main Street Fire Station, Sagamore Fire Station. Both of them equipped with ambulances. If a child gets sick, hurt, you got better coverage. Your roadways will be maintained better. The DPW's right next door. The police station on Main Street. And that's something we have to consider in this day and age, is things happen. We all seen it in the news. And for students to travel over the bridge, they're resilient. They'll get over it. And the same as we all did in this town. We went all the way to the base. So I can't see location being a factor. I like it. It's secluded down there. The kids don't, up at Campus 2000, they're watching all the kids outside playing at the other schools. Here they don't have that problem. I like the concept, and that's why I gave it a 55.
I might go on a little longer on this one.
Can I
Just
take a nap?
to be clear, yeah, I traveled over the bridge my whole school career. I probably had a 45-minute commute at one point to the base every day on the bus, but probably longer. But so in actuality, this is probably my favorite option. I think the operating costs I think are going to be lower. I think while we're still in the preliminary design stages, I think there's probably room to squeeze the electrical costs, the mechanical costs, and a lot of other costs, or the higher infrastructure costs that are associated with building a new building. I think the footprint uses the site very well. I think I agree with Jim's statements a lot, and I know Jim's an architect, I'm an engineer. I think we think probably different than most. I think this is a very efficient use of space on the site. I think the building is a building that the town could use. I agree with Jim. I know our volumes are decreasing. I know our population is actually decreasing. This might be the best long-term solution for the town. However, I did not rate it. I gave it a 0 for the simple fact that I don't think we have enough armor to wear to go to town meeting to fight the fight to put the building over here. I could stand up there and say all these things make great sense, and people always vote with their hearts. They vote with their emotions, and just from the few public presentations that we've seen, and I'm not criticizing, but from the few public presentations we've seen, those emotions have been very strong. for having a school on the other side of the bridge. So like I said, I think we're too early on to really rate it on a lot of these criteria, but I didn't rate it, I gave it a 0.
And not to interrupt you, John, the only thing that I'll say is that, and I think you had the other one with a 0, if you can, it would be good to put a number, only because for the record, I don't think we should score it based on if we stood up at a podium at town meeting and what the voters will think. I think that's part of how you can score it, but I don't think you should score it that way. And if you have some convictions about what's good and bad about these, I think you should put a number to it. And, you know, the way it falls at town meeting will be that way, but, you know, to kind of put it out of sight and out of mind, just assume that it's a failure to begin with. I mean, renovating an existing building could be but let's not give it a 0, let's give it a number.
You're correct. I could go back and redo some of my scores. I mean, I tried to keep it to a 3, 2, 1 for the. I originally looked at this a different way, and then I kind of came back and said, no, I think, I think there's an option that kind of stands out above the rest for both the overall, what we've heard at all the meetings, and that's why I've kind of, I kind of put all my eggs in one basket, I guess, the way I did the voting on this. So I could go back and reassess that though.
It would, I'd appreciate it. I mean, there's people that aren't here tonight that, and I don't want to say shame on them, but shame on them, because this is important, and if you're here to vote, then don't give yourself a 0. You're here, so give it a number, and those are the ones that we'll look at, and, you know, we'll put it through. All right. So, let's move to option 3A. 885 students at Bourndale. That's with 5th grade.
I gave this one a 38. This was tied with my lowest of the options at Bourndale. I have heard a lot of feedback from the community, and I strongly believe that it's always good at this point in the game to have options and to not try to narrow down everything to what my own core convictions are, because I think it's really important to be able to hear different ideas and to be able to see if there's a best way to blend things together. I personally believe that this option is huge. I just cannot wrap my head around that many students, everyone in one spot. I understand the projections, you know, that they certainly could go down, but who's to say that you just can't predict the future with everything that's going on in our society nowadays. So my score was 38. I do think it's a large school. I think it's good to have all the kids in one location. That's been brought up a few times, that every child gets to go through all of their grades together, and I think that's a positive, but again, the size could be a drawback as well. So I think that's, I'll wrap that up.
Mary Jo?
I gave option 3A. Oh, sorry, a 40. I honestly, I'd like to see what the design of this building would look like, because I like that it's a little quirky. However, I'm not sure that's, we might at some point be in the same situation we were at with the first design of Bourndale. However, I know that this puts the 5th grade, helps the middle school by putting the 5th grade out of that building. But I gave it a 40.
So for this option, my overall score was a 41. I just mentally, I'm just having a hard time getting over the sheer size of this building. When you look at it, it's right on the edge of the road, which it means it's only yards away from the DPW property. Again, for the options, I think the positive things about being at Bourndale is some of the things that Liz has said already about, collaboration and that sort of thing, those are, definitely very positive, but, I really would hate to see the loss of the resources that we use on the site now for Peebles with the nearby schools in terms of the mentoring and the facilities with all the schools. But the other thing, Jim, to your point about the numbers going down, that's already accounted for. So I don't wanna, I guess I would just be cautious about predicting that the school's gonna disappear. So part of what the MSBA has already done is, they've already done those reduction projections. So I just.
Oh, right, because that's the 250
Yeah,
that's incorporated.
so-
But I'm just saying, beyond that,
Yeah, but-
this might be the
Yeah.
worst-case scenario.
Right, okay, so I'm just, well, when you said there wouldn't be a need for two schools, I just would be, I'm just not sure I could agree with that much of a reduction, is what I'm saying. Especially with, as you say, or as Dusty said, what is going on in the world, the unknown entity here is, what is the future of the Air Force Base? And as the principal of Peebles, that's definitely, the kids coming in and out is something that is always something that we have to be cognizant of. So if there's any kind of changes to that facility and the resources out there, that would definitely impact the school community in terms of the size. So that's just something I don't want us to lose sight of over time. So even if we did have a loss, it's not to say that we wouldn't have a different need for it.
Right.
To make it, render it useless, so to speak. So I just think it's important to remember that. And I understand what Steve was saying about kids know their classroom. And, there is a lot of truth in that, but they do spend a big chunk of their day in other parts of the building. So, in that sense, like I know at Peebles, it's a smaller school, so the kids really are very familiar with all parts of the school. The library, the cafeteria, the gym, the recess area, and those are probably within a minute or 2 minutes of walking distance, so. And it's not to say that those areas at Bourndale would be further away, but, I just think, in terms of knowing the whole building, I think it wouldn't happen. And I think that would be a sad thing if they didn't. That's part of the whole thing, is it's your school, it's not just part of your school that you identify with. But in terms of, all those other reasons that I've already stated, I just think this is an enormous building for an elementary school.
I gave this option a 48. It was a little bit higher than the other one just because of the layout of the other building, or the other 885 option. I go back and forth on the size. I do think it's a very large building. I think a benefit of that is it does alleviate the 5th grade at the middle school. When I listen to people talk about having a campus feel, I think this truly creates an elementary campus in the town, which is a very focused, younger generation, like I said, a very elementary focused type of campus. When I look at this particular design as opposed to 3B, I see this as, again, an elementary campus that has an early childhood focus center and then a more of an intermediate center. So I almost, the part where I kind of back off on the size is when I think of it almost as two separate buildings with that learning commons and the community space in the middle, which in my mind then kind of alleviates that hefty size, if you will, and the number of students. And again, a lot of pros and cons that we keep going back and forth about with all the different options, so.
This 3A, 3B scored the same for me, 45 for both of them. That was my second lowest score. Initially, well, to be honest with you, the only thing that this building really does is it creates that elementary campus collaboration. Students receive very consistent learning, teaching and learning because of the opportunities for collaboration. But after watching us go through this a little bit and taking a look at it, what we're in essence really doing is building an elementary school next to an elementary school. And I just think that the cost of doing that just isn't going to work, and is not marketable at the community level, to build two elementary schools in essence next door to each other. So it, there are some things that are enticing about it. Obviously, again, educationally, it's good. But as far as maximizing the MSBA reimbursement, as far as utilities and things of that nature, I just don't see it really bearing out to be the best option for an addition on that side of the bridge.
Those are great points that have been made, especially by the two elementary principals who live in this every day.
Yes.
There are advantages to it, but I just cannot get beyond just the size and the number of kids in the building. It's laid out in an advantageous way. I like the way the fifth grade is integrated into the building, but again, it's just too big. It fills up that site like leaves absolutely almost no green space, and I gave it a 40.
Okay, well, this one for me, I gave a 54. There's several options. They're all within like a point or two of each other, because I think there's a lot of advantages to a lot of the designs. In this one, I think some of the advantages is there's that elementary campus, and you're actually helping out the middle school, because you're taking fifth grade, you're moving it over here. And I still think that, this came up with the community discussion, is we haven't explored, and it's not our task to, but if for some reason we went with an option where everything was at Bourne, we can't assume that Peebles is a liability. There could be money to be made with Peebles also. And so that can help offset, and I can't say that that's for sure, but and again, it's not our task, but I don't think we should always look at it as a demo project. Doesn't have to be a demo project, doesn't have to be a liability. So the 885 is a big number. The good news about the 885 is you're taking on the fifth grade, you're helping alleviate the middle school, and you're sort of reinventing, I guess, elementary education in Bourne. So there's a lot going on there. There definitely is. But those are my takes on that one.
Okay, I gave this one my lowest score, which is a 40. Consensus, most everybody else, I think it's just, I never heard of an elementary school that large before, so I think it's just personally too large of a school.
I gave both of these options, 3A and 3B, a score of 43, and really I don't have anything new to add. I don't think it's viable. I don't think the community would ever support it, and I hate to see us waste the time and resources to go through all this and everybody's time here and the financial impact, and I just don't think it's, I don't think it's viable. So for me, they ranked like 4th and 5th.
I ranked it at a 44. I just feel it's too big. I'm afraid the kids will be lost.
We won't lose them,
We won't
promise.
lose them. It may take us a while
Some of them
it may
I
take
wish
us a
you
while
would,
to find
but-
them. We won't lose them.
They're gonna put fences.
And that's how
all
I
over.
feel about it, is same as a lot of people. It's just too big.
Yeah, I pretty much, I had this as, my new scoring is 32. So this is my lowest, though. The
Pressure.
next two are my lowest.
Peer
So
pressure.
31, 32, and 31.
All right, great. So let's, option 3B, we stay with the 885 at Bourne, and it's different it still has fifth grade, just a different design configuration to the addition. More linear
Go back to you.
out in front of the building.
So I gave this one the same score I gave the last one. It's a 38. Again, the size I can't get over. I'm not a fan of the layout of this. I think it's like a big giant box. I do prefer the other layout better. But I don't like the size. It's too big.
I gave this a score of 40 for the reasons I mentioned in 3A. Similar.
I gave this a score of 44. Just nothing really new to add except for having the fifth grade there is a good option. So, Elizabeth.
This was my second lowest score at 41. I think this perpetuates, the concern people have because it's just a parallel addition, if you will. That does create a problem with travel back and forth because it doesn't help keep kids kind of in that centralized location where specials are as far as the gym or the cafeteria, things like that, and kids at that far end of the building. There would be a lot of travel time with this layout involved, and I really just, there's nothing aesthetically pleasing about spending that much money to put that on the front of the building.
This one was the same score as 3A, 45, and for the same reasons that I gave for 3A, I would submit for 3B, if you recall those.
Watch it on TV. Yeah, everything that I said about 3A goes for 3B, too big, and it's the same score, 40.
For this one, I have a 56. Like I said, I had a bunch in within a point or two of each other. It is quite large. I'm not sure that, and I think Steve pointed out correctly, it's really an elementary school attached to another elementary school. Although I will say that with the linear configuration, the site works a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of nice about it. But it's probably a big undertaking to pull this off, and there is a lot of disturbing the existing building that you would have to do to kind of pull off this addition. So that's about all I have for this one.
Okay, I also gave it one of my lowest scores of 42 for the same reasons, just about the size of the school.
As I mentioned, I gave it a score of 43, and I guess everybody's already made the comments that need to be made about that.
I gave a score of 44 on this one also. Same thing, just too big.
I had a score of 31. This one was my lowest.
Can I just ask a question? So for all of the auctions at Bourne-Dale, is the construction schedule around the same time frame? Is one option shorter than the other in terms of, if it were to be over there, in terms of the disruption to kids? Is one less time than the other in building?
It's just a magnitude of scale of the project. This has slightly larger footprint, so there's a few months tacked onto it. But there's other relationships that, the phasing is relatively minimal in the existing building, but,
The option threes are a few months longer than.
yeah, it's just mainly the scope.
Say that again, Joe?
Option three, the two option threes are
Two
a
option
few
threes.
months longer than the option two. And that'll-
Just 'cause
that's-
they're
that's
bigger.
level.
It's just bigger and there's more interface between
All right, I didn't know
the
that-
items, yeah.
where they were being attached, okay.
Okay, so now we're moving on to option 4, which is back at Peebles and adding 5th grade and 410 students with a new school.
This was actually my favorite. I gave it a 57. I think it accomplished a lot of the goals that I had in my mind when I first started becoming involved with this, as far as trying to make everybody happy as much as you can with limitations. I think this satisfies keeping the community school on that side of the bridge. It allows for continuing collaboration with the high school students, which I think is great. My kids are still talking about their experiences in Innovation Studio. I think it's awesome that they can take advantage of that. It's right there. I do really think that the 5th grade belongs in the elementary school, and I think this allows for that to happen. I've heard that there could be some concern with bringing the Bourne-Dale kids over only for 5th grade for 1 year in this school and then bringing them to the middle school. But then the argument is, right now, people who live on the Cape side of the bridge have to bring their kindergartners over to Bourne-Dale and then back to Peebles and then to the middle school. So there's a lot of shuffling. It's very hard to eliminate that without having that big giant school we've already discussed. So personally, I do think that this is a nice option. It's a new school. It doesn't require a lot of interaction with the students as the building is going on. So I don't think there's a lot of disruption there. And I love where it's located on the campus.
Okay, Mary Jo?
This too was my highest score of 61. I like this. I like it, that it's not going to renovate Peebles. I like that or I think I should back up. I think no matter what happens to any of these options, there is a disruption to students, just because if there are construction vehicles on a site, and there are kids in a building and windows, there's a little bit of disruption. But this seems to be the least disruption to the staff and students. I think this is a perfect size school. I think it gets the 5th grade out of the middle school, which is something I think we've always wanted. However, any school we've ever built in this town was open, crowded. So, let's hope this isn't, this is the first that isn't, and this is my favorite.
This is, of all the options, this is absolutely my favorite because of the new tennis courts. No, kidding.
First things first.
Kidding.
Priorities.
Sorry, couldn't resist. So, I mean, the building design is amazing. The community access and cutting off from the academic wings is amazing. The location on the site is, but I would have to say, you know, the thing that really swayed me about this is the 5th grade part of this building. Haven't taught at the middle school since it opened for 15 years, and haven't been a health teacher, teaching grades 5 to 8. The range of topics is huge from 5th to 8, and so when I think about 5th grade being back at the elementary, where they're supposed to be, and those kids being leaders, I think is amazing. And I think, for me, having the 5th grade on the Peebles side of the bridge, if we're gonna take the 5th grade out, makes the most sense, because we are so close to the middle school. The things that we could do, even though the Bourne kids would be with us for a year, the things that we could do with the 5th grade in that year, and then the partnerships that we could form with the middle school ahead of time, so that those kids would be familiar with the middle school before they even got there. It would help so much with the transition, having those kids on that campus familiar with the facilities and the resources in that area already, so that it reduces the impact of the transition for the Bourne kids. So I gave that score 65. I'm done, Elizabeth.
Okay. I'm just checking. This one tied for my top score at 65. It actually tied with option 2A for me. I do love this option the best for the various Peebles options. I don't think it's too small. I think it's a little bit more cohesive as far as the grades are concerned. I've said with any of the options, the kids are resilient. I didn't love it at first that the 5th grade was going to be heading over for a year. And once I got the adult brain out of my way and thought about it through the kids' eyes, they have to transition at some point together. So why not transition in a smaller, more, comfortable elementary setting and then go off altogether? So I don't see that anymore as a drawback. And I love the way this building looks on the Peebles site as well. So this was one of my top options.
This was my highest score. This was 58, because I think it really checks all the boxes when you really look at it, and especially what we've been hearing at the community forums. We've been discussing with our own personnel within the district, and the needs of our students. What it really does is, for me, is it's that 5th grade that's really a key component for me. Believe it or not, there is a precipitous drop in student achievement whenever you transition them from one facility to the next. What this allows us to do is really stage that so that we can try to mitigate or alleviate some of that precipitous drop, because one of the huge components of all that is the social aspect of it. And when you put 5th graders in with 8th graders and expect them to be socially competitive with 8th grade students, we really run a lot of risks It doesn't typically work for the majority of kids. It works for some, because some fifth graders are already acting like eighth graders, but but I just think this really stages the learning better for students going from elementary to middle school. And it doesn't take away all of the opportunities that, some children will have on this side of the bridge, on that side of the bridge, with access to the middle school and the high school. Again, I just think, listening to everything that's being said, this really checks a lot of boxes for me. So this was my highest one.
Also, my favorite. I think that probably the two things that pushed it over for me were the response at the community forums. Everybody clearly liked this option the best, and the other thing is the fifth grade. Barnstable for years had a dedicated fifth grade building, and that actually worked out really well, because fifth graders arrive as babies and leave as adults, and it's a very, very transitional year, as we all know. And and for that reason, I don't see having kids move for 1 year. I don't see that as a big deal at all. And I love the campus resources available, and so for that reason, that is why I rated it a 54, which is my highest.
I rated this option very well, 55. I thought that it's great to get the fifth grade back in elementary school. Again, with this site, a new building, it's not enormous, and it does meet a lot of criteria of what people are looking for with their elementary school. So this one was rated high by me.
Okay, this is also my highest rated. I gave it a 54. I think it makes more sense to build a bigger building if you're gonna, on the south side of the bridge. It gives more options. If some point the elementary expanded, you could put the fifth grade, I guess, back in the middle school if that was an option or whatever. I like that idea. But yeah, it gives more flexibility having a larger building than building a smaller building. I think it makes most sense to have the campus setting, everybody else said, have the resources of the other schools and everybody be right there. I think it's the best option.
This was my best option as well. I scored it at a 56, pretty much for all the reasons everybody's mentioned. I think this is the way to go. I really like the way the site is used, and this seems to me to be just ideal. Leave it at that.
I also gave it a high score of 53. I like the school, the layout, and where it is. Everybody else has pretty much agreed with it.
This is my highest rated one, 59. I'll go back and just say that my option 1G and 2A were 40 and 42 respectively when I totaled up those scores. But 59, this was a 59. I felt it was a probably the best alternative that we're looking at when you look at across not only all the items that are on the sheet, but some of the intangibles that aren't on here, plus I think the costs that they started to outlay in the back. So this was very close with option 4B with me, though. So.
Okay. So our last one is 4B, and that's fifth grade, and it's just a renovated Peebles expanded footprint.
I rated this one a 41, which is one of my lower ones. I do really strongly believe the fifth grade should be incorporated. We've already said this a million times. I don't think that renovating the existing building, as much as it would be great to do that for emotional purposes for some people, I don't think it would be a smart use of the town's money. I don't think it's very efficient.
Natasha, were you able to sum up your 1A?
Yes, that was a 39.
Yeah, Liz?
I gave this building a score of 49. I like the design of the building. I wish it didn't incorporate renovating Peebles. And with the other plan, I think the delineation of the fifth grade as, I like that design a little bit better than the way it was designed here.
I gave this a score of 46. I just don't support any renovating of Peebles. It's just not worth it. I know some people have high hopes for its future use, but, I just don't see it. Sorry, I don't. And only 'cause I practically live there, so.
I gave this one a 54. It was one of my lower ones, but I don't see this one. I don't like the renovation at all. I just think that's a really poor use of money. But I also don't think this design lends itself to as many creative spaces as the option 4A does. It's kind of boxy and just very set up as far as the classroom spaces and everything else, whereas I think the other one lends itself to some more creative and flexible learning spaces that people have really been talking about adding into the school. And my first one was 48.
I gave this one my third highest score, which was a 48. As a principal of a school that was renovated, completely renovated, and I came in at the very end of the construction project and enjoyed going into a renovated school. I really like the aesthetics of an old building, and one of the things was a real good connection to the community, that they really were able to speak to, what the facility looked like, what they remember it looking like, and then the modernization of it. There is an emotional connection, as we talked about, whether it's at town meeting, whether it's just somebody walking off the street who wants to come in and take a look at what Peebles becomes. I think that the biggest concern I have, now, let me be clear, this is my third highest, but it received the most number of 2s. I only had 2 3s in the entire rating of this. But one of the things that's extremely concerning to me is with the renovation project is that you have large gathering spaces that are still above and below, instructional areas. So for example, to this point, the cafeteria is above other classrooms, and we know what it's like to have the gymnasium above the cafeteria. Those things aren't really optimal to me. Living within a budget, I understand, but there's still that old soul in me that likes some type of connection to, the history of the community. I believe the community invests in something like that as well, so. It didn't receive my highest score by 10 points, but it was my third highest score for those reasons.
Some of the things I like about 4A, I also like about 4B, the fact that it's in a campus environment and it does alleviate the pressure at the middle school for the 5th grade. But I just cannot support a renovation of Peebles in any way. And even though I have some high scores for 4B, the net comes out at 43. So not my favorite.
For me, this one was tied for the lowest at 42. There's plenty of discussion tonight about renovating Peebles, and I tend to agree with Steve. I think that there's a lot of buildings that could be renovated and done quite nicely. The question is, in Bourne, if Peebles is one of those buildings, and that's what I don't know. I think it's fair to say, is this a classic car that we're looking at that we want to restore, or is it not? And so that's where we have to decide if it's worth putting the money into, and I guess that's what the community would decide. I would suggest that's probably not, but so that's why I've rated it low, considering the cost and then what we're left with at the end.
I rated it with a score of 47 because, as I said earlier, I don't really see much sense in renovating Peebles. If you look at the cost estimates, the cost of the new school and renovating to get both 410 students is, the difference is like $100,000. So it wouldn't seem to make much sense to attempt to renovate that school. We can build a brand new school with the same number of students, the same cost.
I rated this one the same as I did 1G, which was a 24. I just think it's a non-starter, and I go back to the car reference. It may be a classic car, but it's got a rotted frame. And to put any money into it is just, I just would never vote for it, and I would never ask the community to support it.
I also gave it a low score of 44, and I do not think, like Rick just said, made reference to a frame. I've walked that school 4 or 5 times. I see a lot of structural issues, and I can't support it.
My, I had a rating of 52 on this. It was my second highest. I think it's probably the best use of site that we've seen on all the drawings. I really feel that the circulation on the site, the efficiency of the site really works well for a school. I think it probably provides less disruption during building than some of the other renovation addition options. I've been involved with renovations to old buildings. I've seen some very successful buildings or renovated that were older that people probably didn't think had much life left in them. You know, I think as we move down the process further, we probably could fine tune some of those numbers in the back. There might be more of a cost savings, but I mean, I really think that this, because if you can kind of picture it if you just drive up to the site, you can kind of picture how this would flow and work on the site. I think it would be a great option, but.
All right. So,
Could I ask a question, Jim?
Yeah.
Just overall, I know what we spent to build Bourne-Dale, and I know that was we were extremely lucky because of the favor that everybody was out of work and we got like 25 bids. But these prices just seem over the moon.
yeah, I
I
think
just
that,
had concerns about the cost.
well, and that's something that we need to work with Joel and Kent on, and in fairness, what they have is, you know, there's a lot of backup documentation that they have to that. But again, where I was saying with the juggling, I don't think that it has to land there, but we can't value engineer something that really doesn't
Right,
even
no, I
have a
I
footprint
understand.
yet. That's close. So it's a difficult situation, but it's the way that we have to go about this.
I get it.
The process-wise, and then as far as the numbers, sure. I mean, who wouldn't want to see lower numbers? So if we can do that, then we will explore that.
And we can also provide the recent projects that have been approved by the board. And they track everything.
I'm sure you will.
So I was making a tally of the various options and how we voted, and just looked at the top 3 from each of us, and how many times a particular option landed in the top 3 of our votes. Option 4A landed in the top 3 11 times. Option 4B landed in the top 3 8.5 times, and it landed in 8.5 times because we had 2 equal scores given for as our third highest option. In other words, let me explain. So, Bill had 44 for option 3B and option 4B, which was your third highest. So I just give it a half
I got
point,
you.
just for rounding and talking purposes. So 4A was in top 3 11 times, 4B 8.5 times, 2A 6 times, 1A 6 times. 1G was in the top 3 once. 3A was not in anybody's top 3. And 3B was in 1.5 times. Is that surprising, those results, or is that how it as our conversation unfolded, where we were thinking it was going.
Well, I'm a little surprised on the 4B.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
But I will say that even if we picked 3, we'll always carry the cost to a renovation to Peebles anyhow. So the question would be, are we carrying the cost to a small renovation to Peebles or the 410 renovation? Right?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't decide just on the ranking. I mean, this is telling us
Right.
generally just how we independently came across our evaluations. We need to carry at least 3 into the PSR phase. Communities tend to go 3 or 4 when there's a lot of different grade configurations
Mm-hmm.
involved. You have to have one of those as a renovation addition type option, as a matter of comparison.
So
You
1G,
don't have to have one as
or
a Peebles or one as a Bourne-Dale, it's just one as a
yeah,
renovation.
but would 1G or 4B have to carry on? Is that what you're suggesting?
One or the other. If you, in some respects, just carrying on with a 2A provides for your renovation and addition
Okay.
option.
Okay.
But if you want to make sure you're really comparing Peebles 410 Reno versus a Peebles 410 new, then I would say carry both of those.
But I
So you
thought
can-
we also discussed that if someone at a meeting or a town meeting said, well, did you look at renovating Peebles? Wouldn't you feel like you had to have carried one of the Peebles options to show
Well,
that
that's our
That's
choice.
ours.
You did.
That's our choice.
that you did? Well, okay. Well, I'm just throwing that out there then.
I think 4A and 2A is an automatic move forward. 2A,
that again, Steve?
I think 2A and 4A are automatic move forwards
Yeah?
as we go down the.
Okay.
So finding the third one,
Is that a motion?
I make a motion that we move option 4A and option 2A in that order. No, just kidding. Forward into the PSP phase of the project.
Just those 2?
No,
Well,
to
just
start.
to get the, yeah, just to
Just to-
start.
Just to move them out of the way.
Right.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor? Or discussion?
Could you tell me what the totals of each option were? I am just, I know.
You mean money?
No, I'm
No,
not,
we
no,
did,
no,
we
no.
did just did an average
Okay.
of everybody, and 1A was 48. 1G is 34. 2A is 48. 3A is 42. 3B is 42. 4A, 57.9.
So that's 58?
58.
Is that 58? Okay.
And 4B is 45. So-
Again,
know if
my
averages-
motion is only just to move 2 so that those 2 are solidified, and then we can discuss what the third or possibly a fourth option would be. But I just, instead of deliberating the third one around 2 that I think are pretty consistent for us as a group, I would just like to move those 2 forward.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Is there any discussion that the,
We already had
We
a
need a-
second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Natasha seconded.
okay. Any more further discussion? Anyone does not want to see those 2, any one of those 2 go forward? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, unanimous for 2A and 4A to move forward.
Okay, if I could speak, I really like the fact that Joel said that 2A counts as a renovation project as well. That's helpful in the discussion. Although, I still think 4B should be priced out in some way, but that's just my preference. Again, I've seen renovated facilities, you know, at a cost savings, if done well, done right, and all the homework is done prior to. But I just think that 1A is just too small. I just think we're going down a rabbit hole with 1A, so. But I do like the fact that 725 2A counts as a renovation project moving forward with MSBA, so. No motion out of that conversation.
So we will need to add one more.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm letting someone else do that.
Okay.
We need to add one more?
Yeah.
I think that 4B is probably that one.
Yes, yep.
I'm actually surprised that
I am
one
too.
A
Yes.
scored over 4B.
I was just gonna say that.
I'm surprised by that. And I don't know if it was just from our scoring, that being the first out of the gates.
Probably.
Possibly getting, you know, different numbers, but per the conversation and the pros and cons people are talking about, I would have said 4B clearly would have scored higher than 1A. So it was interesting to see those numbers. And
I think of the remaining options, that 4B is the best one to go with, to move to the other two.
I would put that in the form of a motion to forward 4B. That's the motion.
Yep. Discussion,
Oh.
I just had a couple things on that. We have the 410 for a new school for Peebles, which moves the 5th grade. We have the 725 at Bourne. Doesn't impact 5th grade. 4B moves the 5th grade to Peebles, just a renovation of Peebles. I'd like to see, although I don't think it's the bang for the buck, it probably would be good to see the smaller school move forward too, because there'll be questions about that. In other words, we're not showing an alternative for not moving the 5th grade. So we sort of have to make a policy decision in a way that we're moving 5th grade, or we're still allowing 5th grade to be at the middle school and moving an option forward where, you know, it doesn't move.
Option 2A does not move 5th grade at all.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't move 5th grade, but then it becomes the only option.
The consensus I'm hearing is 250 is small out of the gate, and we will be overcrowded in every way. It'll be nice, shiny, new, but we'll be backing up a trailer. to
Yeah,
put
it
kids
looks
in.
like we.
Well, the
if
only
we
reason
put-
is-
If we put that forward, it looks like we haven't done
done
it
that.
anymore.
Yeah, John?
I'm actually, I'm supporting Jim on this because I think what he's looking at is we're not, this next phase is still the research phase, right?
Right.
We're still trying to pick,
At the end of
we're
the
still
next
looking at all the
phase,
best
we'll get
phases.
to one option.
And I think what he's saying is that if we're basically, we don't want option 2A just to be completely off the table right off the bat, because it doesn't talk about the 5th grade and it's on the other side of the bridge. I think he's looking for two options that don't touch 5th grade, that stay on both sides, that are both evaluating that option, the no 5th grade option.
If we put a 4th option through, what does that mean? Increased
It-
cost and feasibility?
No,
Increased cost in PSP?
no,
Increased cost, period?
no,
This time?
no.
Increased paperwork.
Increased paper?
That's okay.
My
Another
only
tree bites the
concern was-
dust.
Sorry, Dusty, go ahead.
One quick question. On this 250, do we still get as much reimbursement for a 250 school?
The percentages would be the same across.
Whether it
For
was
the new-
250,
For the renovations,
700,
you would add in.
800?
Well, no, for the new. For the
Okay.
renovations, additions, you would add the additional reimbursement for that proportion of renovation. But that's in the next phase. So, at the PSR phase, we will work with MSBA to calculate what the reimbursement, the general reimbursement is for each of the options you carry forward on, in order for you to select the preferred option.
So should we move forward like a 1A and a 4B to satisfy that? I mean, that's four.
I guess my concern would be, Jim, I understand what you're saying, but to me, it just looks like that we didn't do our homework if we put it forward. Like, it's clearly a lot of money for minimal number of students.
Well, it is the cheapest money, and I don't want the argument that why did we move ahead the more costly projects and we didn't keep
Yeah,
the
that's a good
cheapest one
point.
on the table.
That's a different point,
It's
yeah.
the
Because it's in the
cheapest
best
option, but
interest
it
of-
doesn't really meet
I,
our needs.
It's
and
the-
I think the
it's the-
town should decide that. I
It's the
don't want to
bottom line,
decide
but-
that for them. I don't want to take off the cheapest option for them.
Should take off the cheapest option after only being at this for 3 months, right? I mean, we're really not far enough down the road. I know people have certain feelings about it, but
Okay, if I could just look at the math differently. If you take the cost per student.
Oh, I know.
It's actually the most expensive. That's my
Okay,
point. I think that we should take it
yes.
off for that reason, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, we understand that, but the bottom dollar is what is seen.
Yeah,
Nobody's doing that equation, or most people don't do that equation. They look at what the increase to their taxes would be, as well as the cost of the project. I think that we should move 1A and 4B forward. I know it adds another set of circumstances, but I think that there's some merit to that.
Do we want to do the vote on the current motion and then reintroduce another motion, or is that a friendly amendment to the motion?
I would accept the friendly amendment.
Who seconded it? They have to accept it too.
Well,
second.
A friendly second.
Yes.
I don't really see any downside to it. I would have a tough time asking the community to support something that we don't, but if it's an option that we need to have there for whatever reason, I'm okay with it.
I don't think 1A makes a lot of sense for the community. But in the public setting, you know, when we're talking about dollars, I don't think we should ignore the cheapest option.
No, I think you're right.
You know, I think it needs to move forward. So let the public vet that and say, we agree with you. We think that that's a waste of our money. But if that was still the cheapest option, I think that that needs to still be on the table.
Hasn't the town, by the formation of this committee, though, placed a responsibility of making sure that whatever we do is what's needed by the school system? And so by putting forward an option that doesn't address the needs of the school system, I think I don't think we're doing a service to the community. I don't think we're doing our job, because
Well,
it doesn't meet any of our criteria. It's too small, it doesn't get the 5th grade out, and it's too expensive for what you get out of it. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
well, you're talking about 1A.
Yeah.
But if we look at it the other direction, we just need to have 3 or 4, and it could be 3, ideas for the spring that we eventually will come down to 1. So if you don't like, but if you don't like 1A, do you like any of those other options over 1A, not 4B, that you would substitute to move forward to the town? I guess that's.
I can't see wasting our efforts or anything else when the cost factor per square foot is higher. What are you getting for your dollar? Do you buy a Volkswagen when you can have a Lincoln for the same money?
No, so what I'm suggesting is if 1A doesn't meet, if you don't think 1A meets what the school needs, and you don't think the community would support it, would you put 3A or 3B in its place right now to move forward?
No.
That's the real question. I mean,
Why?
So you want your 4 options?
I
is
think
what
4.
you're at.
I think 4 it makes sense, and I think having a non-5th grade and a 5th grade makes sense, and a lowest amount. I mean, these are just my comments. Anyone can chime in.
So right now, there's a motion to include 1A and 4B. Should we make a vote, or should we modify that motion? I'm not quite sure how we're,
I think the superintendent probably should pull his, why don't we vote 4B and then we can vote the 1A? It's up to you guys. I mean, I strongly feel that we should include that option in this. It's almost like the do-nothing study. We all kind of know might not be the preferred alternative right now, but we're really not that far into this study yet. The next phase is really the meat and potatoes phase, where you're gonna come to this, we're all gonna come down and say, okay, this is our best option. And I agree with Jim that I don't think we're looking at all the student options that we originally started with MSBA fairly without considering that. I think it makes it hard.
I think it's okay for us to struggle with this one. I think a good process would be for us to remove the friendly amendment, vote on 4B, as John was saying, and then take a vote on 1A. And if 1A is a mixed vote, it's a good message. It's a good form of record. But I agree, at this point in time, it's too early for us to say. We're gonna have other opportunities to take it out and remove it. It'll be a good comparable, a good baseline. We can all sit here and agree that it's the cost, we're only looking at the low overall cost. We're not looking at the details behind that. And the next phase will help us with the details behind that to have a better argument to say it's the most expensive building option out there for what we get out of it. So I withdraw my friendly amendment.
I also think that moving forward, a lot of our focus is how the town is going to vote on this, and putting forward options that we really think the town is going to buy into. And as much as I think all of us don't like any of option ones, I think it provides the focus to show the town that even though we have these low costs, it's not something that they're going to want either. But it allows them to see why we've moved on to those other options, and almost puts them more in the category of being in a more beneficial spot of voting for one of those options, as opposed to not having that there as a comparable, if that makes sense.
And I think also when you see 1A and you understand where 1A comes from, exactly what you said, the numbers, the students,
And why
it
the
drives
costs.
you to either 2A or 4A immediately, because you see the benefits to either of those options.
Right.
I mean, I said 4B and 4A, I'm almost treating the same, but it really drives you to the other options because you can see the genesis of where, it might be the lowest amount, but you really don't want to be there. So you want to be somewhere else, but at least it carries it.
I think to vote on those two options separately is a good idea, because I would hate to see us group 1A with 4B and have it get a bunch of negative votes based on the 4B part and fail. So I would like to go back to the original motion in a very friendly way. To move 4B forward and leave 1A out of this conversation for the moment.
Okay.
And that's my
Is
motion.
there a second? Just 4B, we're just voting on moving 4B
As the
and
third
adding that to 2A and 4A.
Yes, I second that.
Okay.
Yes. The pressure was on her.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Abstain? Okay, one opposed, no abstentions.
I make a motion that we move 1A as a fourth option,
The same option.
entering into the PSP, knowing that we're adding work
That's
onto
why I won't support
Flansburgh Architects. But they're gracious enough to handle it.
That was to move 1A forward as a fourth option. Okay.
is there a second?
No second?
Second for the sake of discussion.
Okay, discussion. Discussion?
Oh, get it
Oh,
on the
yeah,
floor,
no.
discussion of the
I just think it provides a baseline. I think it provides a baseline for what a new construction for the existing grade configuration of Peoples is moving forward. And it will, I'm confident that it will be eject it or reject it at one point in time down the road. I think we are doing a disservice if we don't look at what we currently have grade configuration-wise and what that would look like moving into a brand-new building.
I think that's a valid point. I do have some concern that, especially in this town, given everything that everyone has been through recently, they're gonna focus on the price. And that's gonna, everything else is gonna be canceled out because at the end of the day, we can't afford this. And I think that is a valid concern. I think it makes a lot of sense to have it to compare. I think you also have to understand that there is always a chance that cost could override everything. And that's why, it goes back to the point you had made, that's the reason why this committee was created, and that's something that I personally take pride in being here, is having a voice to bring it back to, it's not always about the bottom line. That's a huge part of it, but that's not what it's all about. So,
In bringing this forward, we're gonna hear more, we're gonna be able to present more and hear more at our community forums as to what this, and see if the community really gravitates towards this. And we'll have an opportunity to present the actual facts around it as to whether it is the best project moving forward.
Should we have a motion and a second?
Yes.
Yeah.
Even though I cannot support this particular building configuration for the purpose of future conversation, I will reluctantly support the motion.
Well, and, you know, just to kind of wrap it up is that I think that the money side of this doesn't work for the students and the size of the school. But if you don't carry it forward, I don't think you have an apples to Peebles anymore. Because you've made a policy decision. If you only carry the 410 option, you've made a policy decision that you're incorporating 5th grade, and you no longer have an apples of, K through 4 to K through 4. You don't have it anymore. If you don't move that option forward, the money doesn't make sense, but the comparison is, I think, what you need. Otherwise, you just have a K through 5, and you're not comparing to what Peebles was or is. That's just.
We don't wanna create a conflicting argument moving forward that we never looked at a comparable to our grade configuration.
And it's not up to us to set policy on the
Right.
grade configuration.
Right.
That's the school committee's job, and I assume they've done it, and,
Have they?
Okay.
Oh, they're interested in this whole project, yeah,
well,
and what it looks like.
what would be,
They haven't
in
taken,
terms of grade configuration,
they're
when
allowing.
we
the-
were on the school committee, we voted a 6-8 middle school and built a building around that. Is there a voted grade configuration?
It's a different process now, so they're allowing the building committee to move forward with what they think is best at this
Okay.
point in time.
Okay.
And they do have, believe it or not, representation on this committee. I know that they're not here this evening, but they do have representation on this committee.
Okay, well, we have a motion, we have a second, and so, all those in favor of moving option 1A as a 4th option? Aye?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
I'm opposed.
One opposed? Any more? Abstain? Okay. One opposed.
Well, this is
Alright.
good work, excellent work.
Thank you, that was,
We do have one,
Yeah.
more vote to do relative to the PDP submission, and that is, vote to authorize the submission of the PDP submission to MSBA. And that, would be a summation of all of the documents that, Betsy and Kent have provided and reviewed with us, a summation of the designs, summation of the costs, certainly a summation of the votes, delineating those 4 options to carry forward into the PSI.
Shouldn't we read it into the record tonight?
yeah. You wish?
No.
I don't.
Can we see the binder? We haven't seen the binder yet.
Show the binder for the camera.
Binder.
All right. Got all that work that was done.
Yep, there you go. And so you'll receive your copy shortly.
Imagine what that'll look like at the end of this process. But I would move to approve and submit to MSBA the PDP as it exists, as Flansburgh has provided us with the documentation and so forth, So I would move that we submit.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Excellent.
No discussion on that one.
So there is a, there is a,
Yeah, I know.
there is a document, that MSBA, is needing to be signed, right out of their regulations. I worked with, Tom, town administrator, to put it on town letterhead. And it's a document that our CEO, Peter, Superintendent Steve, and, Chair of the school committee, Chris, needs to sign. This needs to go in that book, tomorrow. We can, put in that book a scanned copy, and then if the originals get mailed to me, then I can drop the originals off, and that's okay with MSBA, do it, a day or so later. But the copy of the document needs to be within the submission, to MSBA.
I have a meeting with the chair tomorrow, so I can get the chair to the school committee to sign it.
Okay, fantastic. So can I give you these?
Yeah, sure.
And then maybe can Peter stop by?
Can somebody get Peter to stop by the school office?
When?
Huh?
Sir, what time?
Anytime,
Tomorrow?
tomorrow.
Okay, my next question is after 3:30 okay?
Oh, yeah,
Oh, okay.
absolutely.
I'll have them then.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Just walk down to your side of the canal, you'll see them going by, just grab it.
Okay.
Okay, and that'll be excellent. A little tight, because you're gonna, what Betsy and Kent need to do then is get the scanned copy printed, inserted in the book, but also make an electronic CD of the whole book. So,
3:30 is too tight, too late?
And
I
Peter,
think Peter and Chris were outside, but,
Outside right now?
a little bit earlier, that would be
can Peter scan
probably
stuff from
helpful.
home? Can he scan?
See, the only reason is-
I'll be more than happy to get it, bring it around. If I have to bring it around tomorrow to get it signed, I'll be more than happy to help you, Steve. Just let me know.
Okay.
Oh, thanks. Okay.
All right. So I had emailed everyone the technology or the proposed technology open meeting policy. I don't know if there was any feedback that we as a committee wanted to provide to them on it.
I make a motion that the chair of the school building committee sends a letter to the town administrator saying we do not support this policy in whole.
I will
Okay.
second that in a second. This is, after all, the 21st century.
It is.
Correct.
It is,
And
yeah.
if they're afraid of people sitting in public meetings texting, I just think that's unrealistic. We all have been charged with jobs to do, and I think we all take that very seriously, and we're not going to sit in meetings and play video games on our phones. But I think if we don't allow technology at the table, then we're going to be limiting ourselves in a tremendous amount of ways.
I'd like to further that by saying that not only are we in the, I think the main focus of that is violations of the open meeting law, of the deliberation portion of the open meeting law. I could be incorrect, but that's my understanding is why this came to fruition. I find it no different than when somebody gets up and speaks to somebody else's ear in an open, privately, or shuts off the mic to talk. I mean, those are all violations of the open meeting law. So to really be concerned about what's going on with the technology, if we can't even manage that, is not, I think it's irrelevant, so.
We have a second on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's have a vote.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right. I will let them know. I don't know if there was any old or new business anyone had for the committee. Any,
Well, I'll keep the open
right,
tasks.
yeah, some of those
on
are still
meeting
open.
minutes. Yeah.
Public comments? Any further? Okay, seeing. Okay. And our next meeting January 7th, 2016.
Apologize.
No problem.
We're all gonna know.
Just the first of many.
We're going back in time.
Okay.
2016, so everyone have a happy new year. We will see you then. Yeah, we'll have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Thank you, everyone, for